Hi everyone, I'm John. Welcome back to my channel. And I wanted to do another book review for you today. This is a book that was sent to me a while ago, a couple of years ago actually, by a publisher by the name, I'd never heard of them before until I came across them. They are right there, and I don't know how well you can see that. Their name is not the Cascade books, which you can obviously see. Their name is Whiffenstock Publishers. And they published this book by DeLay with a foreword by Kester Bruin called The Cynic and the Fool, The Unconscious in Theology and Politics. And sounded like an interesting premise. Wouldn't know how deep into the weeds I would be getting, or whether I wouldn't be at all and I would be able to follow it. Thankfully, it was very understandable, at least for me. So I'm grateful for that. DeLay is a professor of philosophy who writes at the intersection of a lot of different things. It's very interdisciplinary. Philosophy, critical theory, theology, and psychoanalysis are some of the major things that pop up in this book. And for most people, those topics will make their eyes glaze over, maybe understandably so. But he does a really good job at articulating some complex topics for lay people. DeLay is mostly concerned in this book about the nature of politics and religion and how we talk about politics and religion in a highly divisive world. And the title derives from the idea that our disagreements come about for one of two reasons. The character of the fool, who is either just misinformed or ignorant of a topic but nevertheless wishes to engage in conversation in good faith, or the cynic, who is a nihilistic operator and who doesn't care about the truth at all and only wants to spin doctor and lie and distort perceptions to convince other people of his chosen lie. This does seem to be a distinction that gets too little attention in a so-called post-truth political climate. Whether they know it by name or not, everyone who has spent more than about 3 seconds on the internet is intimately familiar with something called the Dunning-Kruger effect and its implications for the exchange of ideas on social media. It has a logical corollary called the above average effect, which something like 80% of people think that they're above average on any given topic that you ask them about, which is telling and humbling in an odd way. But for whatever reason, we seem to have a hard time reconciling ourselves to a couple of things. One, our own ignorance, when that ignorance can be remedied. And two, that which we, and I don't mean myself to include myself in this group, but this includes scientists and experts, of which I am neither, simply don't have the information to answer. So we don't like when we don't know the answer, and we don't like when we can't know or haven't found out the answer. This might be a remnant of the human tendency to eagerly create patterns where none exist, like we see in the phenomenon of apophenia and pareidolia. Once we settle into a particular pattern or interpretation of something, being shown that we're wrong is, like I said, a humbling process, but it's nevertheless an interlocutor who is operating in good faith must be open to and must consider. But operating in good faith takes conscious effort because our deeply ingrained mammalian physiology subverts our otherwise goodwill, like when it floods our brain with dopamine when our ideas are confirmed, even if that confirmation is just mere confirmation bias. The last paragraph that I read sort of makes it sound like DeLay's sole focus might just be on the psychology of cognitive bias, and that is important in the book. But there's a lot of other fascinating topics that pop up, including a lot of psychoanalysis. And they arise from this apparent conflict of interests between trying to be an in earnest participant in a dialogue, an interlocutor, and the incentives our brain provide us in order to avoid honesty at all costs. And that sort of dichotomy is what DeLay looks at throughout the book. This is a short book, about 160 pages, presented in concise vignette-style chapters which each focus on a particular concept or idea. And it's written, like I said, in a really engaging way that carefully navigates between never really condescending to the reader and also never talking over their heads, which is a tall order when you're talking about writers like Jacques Lacan and Zizek. DeLay is a pretty good steward of the ideas he talks about too. You know, he goes into stuff like Lacan's tripart concept of the real, the symbolic, and the imaginary, but explains what he's talking about as he goes along. He doesn't assume that you have some sort of deep familiarity with the people he's talking about. So if you are curious about why people seem to be increasingly crazy and unable to engage in an open and honest way, this book looks at and raises a number of interesting questions, and maybe more importantly, is very cautious in its optimism about providing potential answers. I liked this book quite a bit. This is The Cynic and the Fool, the unconscious in political, in theology and politics by Tad DeLay. Until next time, bye.